This attractive Indian woman, Jasveena Sangh, holder of an MBA, is currently facing life in prison, along with some others, for supplying superstar actor Matthew Perry, aka Chandler from Friends, with K-etamine, which I will refer to as K during the story.
As we've been reporting, 5 people facing criminal charges in the death of actor Matthew Perry. Federal prosecutors say they each played a role in supplying illegal doses of ketamine to Perry, who died after an accidental overdose last year.
Perry was found unalive in his hot tub with various substances in his system about a year ago, including a massive amount of K that had been allegedly administered to him by his personal assistant not long before he passed. Now, this is something I've seen at the fringes here in LA of rich people or famous people with a lot of money having personal assistants that appear to be, on the surface, regular people, college graduates, that exist purely to get their employer drugs or facilitate whatever weird things they're involved in, or just whatever bullshit they're doing.
Yeah, that person facing a potential life sentence, described in court papers as the ketamine queen, is specifically charged with an allegation that she supplied drugs that led to a person's death.
Old friends say that Jasveena, who returned to LA after getting her MBA at Holt Business University School in London in 2010, was a different person. The same friends said she looked like she had had a nose job and some stuff done. Here's a picture of her graduating high school as opposed to now. So she comes back to the U.S. I don't know, did she grow up? Maybe she grew up in Beverly Hills or something. It sounds like she maybe has a, is that a Persian name? I don't know. But so her friend said she came back, she started a nail salon that flopped. But apparently she was hanging out with a good social crowd. She knew famous people. This is the ex-wife of Guns N' Roses Slash guitarist Slash and her son. But Ms. Sangh felt she was being left behind by her peers who were getting married, starting families, probably had businesses, and she started partying a lot. Now, this is someone told TMZ that in 2014, that's 10 years ago, she had a boyfriend who was serious, but it didn't work out. And then at that point, she started to get into the partying lifestyle a lot more. Now, partying initially was just she became a party promoter. Then at first, just kind of minor drug usage of her apartment, but friends noticed she started having all type of stuff available, and she developed a lot of famous friends doing this party promotion stuff. And apparently she went into rehab at some point where she met Brooke Muller, who was the ex-girlfriend of Matthew Perry, and she met Matthew Perry. Now, unfortunately, some people go to rehab and get straightened out, that's for sure. Some rehabs, you have people dealing in the rehab, and of course, people meet other addicts in rehab, and sometimes they get out and they get back into those lifestyles together. And in fact, you might meet people that do different stuff than you, have access to different stuff than you, and now you're maybe even worse than ever. So this friend said, I've never been at a party at Jasveena's where drugs were out of the ordinary. She lived in West Hollywood. They raided her apartment. At some point, she started to be able to get access to liquid K, probably through this network of doctors she met. Now, K is legal as prescribed for intense depression through K Labs through a licensed doctor. Elon Musk is actually on it.
But you've admitted that you have a ketamine prescription.
Yeah.
What's that for?
Well, I mean, it's pretty private to ask somebody about a medical prescription, you know. But I think it's something I'd say, like, there are times when I have sort of I don't know, like a negative chemical state in my brain, like depression, I guess.
She and the other 4 that face federal charges are accused of supplying ketamine to Matthew Perry, who the DEA says had been receiving legitimate ketamine therapy.
So, like I said, in the last few years, K has become a cutting-edge treatment used by some doctors to treat people with serious depression. There's some talk of it being sort of licensed as an antidepressant, but I don't know if there's been quite enough research done on it. Dr. Charles Grob seems to think not.
My name is Charles Grob, spelled G-R-O-B. I'm an MD. I'm a professor of psychiatry and pediatrics at the UCLA School of Medicine, and I'm the director of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. I've written on the topic of and conducted research with psychedelic drugs for the past almost 30 years. There have been some very, very well-known individuals who developed serious problems with ketamine. First and foremost, a popularizer of ketamine, John Lilly, a very brilliant psychologist in the 50s, 60s, worked for the Navy in the 50s, did the earliest dolphin communication studies, did some very interesting work with sensory deprivation, the flotation tanks. He became extremely enamored of ketamine, couldn't leave it alone, and became, as a result, very, very dissipated and, you know, became progressively more and more dysfunctional.
He and Leary were...
Yeah, they were associates. Yeah, yeah. So ketamine, it's very alluring. The intersubjective state is a fascinating state of mind. However, for those who are just so enamored they can't leave it alone, I think there is a there's a danger, and there's a dark side to the use of. People need to be more cognizant of, and this great interest in the ketamine treatment model. Honestly, I have to see more evidence before I'm convinced. At this point, I'm still somewhat dubious.
There was some talk of outlawing K. There's a big problem with it in England as well, but it's very useful medically. It's very stable. It was told to me by a doctor that ketamine is, you can give it to people for surgery and for pain killing, and he put them under for surgery, and it's very stable. It can sit. He used the example of saying you had a little medical hut in some obscure, poor jungle area, or just some poor part of the world that didn't have good medical facilities. It can sit on a shelf for years in a humid environment, a dry environment, and be very stable. It doesn't degrade, so it's a useful medication. So while it might be being used for bad uses by some people, they're not going to ban it. So as the news reports show, along with Miss Singh, the K Queen, and apparently she was selling METH, whatever you probably wanted, much like Malari Todorova, aka Mimi Snowy, who I did a story on 2 years ago. All right, we're here on Hollywood and Argyle. This is one of those stories that she was another middle-aged woman with advanced degrees here in LA that chose to move out of the regular workforce, even though, again, this Mimi Snowy had 2 advanced degrees and chose to be a dealer. Mimi Snowy had actors here in Hollywood, people that would have like bit roles or be extras. She would have them delivering, and she, one night, her people delivered some dirty blues, aka some tainted OXYs, to Maniscalco. This was he was in his early 30s. It was the heir to Bedhead, the hair care product fortune, and he passed away, and a big investigation was started because a rich kid died. Not a rich kid, a human being, but when, you know, the police respond to attention and pressure just like anybody else. Someone ODs on the sidewalk, no one cares, they don't investigate. Someone dies in a multi-million-dollar mansion and has rich and powerful parents, well, they want to know what happened. So anyways, this other woman that's very much like Jasveena Singh, her and her driver, as you see from these Bureau of Prisons report or searches, they're both still cooling their heels in the Metropolitan Department of Corrections. That's the federal lockup in LA. They're waiting. Federal charges, can't get out on bond. Apparently they had followed her or maybe seen text messages. This was 2 years ago, so those dirty blues were first starting to hit, and she was getting them from some CA Artel salesman here, and she was a shady bitch because she was buying them for that low price for the fake ones, but she was selling them to everybody at the regular price like they were real. You know, if you're going to be a drug dealer, tell people what you're selling them, or you might kill somebody and get charged, which is exactly what happened to her. So she's still cooling her heels. So they're not just walking Jasveena Sangh, the K-Queen, through some sort of public embarrassment and then it's going to all go away. This Mimi Snowy woman can't get out of jail. She's in federal lockup. And the people that served Mac Miller, they all been sentenced. They've all got over 10 years in prison because they knew what they were doing. That's the thing. They knew they had bad pills. People were telling them they were getting sick, and they were still selling the same thing. Even after Mac Miller died, those same people were doing the same stuff with the same stuff. So it's not an accident. So there are some predatory dealers out there you need to be wary of. That's why you should be very careful about deciding if you're going to indulge in substances.
Today, 5 people were charged with supplying Perry ketamine, including his assistant, defendant Kenneth Iwamasa.
These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways.
Perry, who struggled with addiction much of his life, was reported to have been receiving ketamine infusions for depression and anxiety, and that had to be administered by a doctor in a medical setting. 2 of the defendants are doctors. On numerous occasions, investigators say Dr. Salvador Placencia falsely prescribed, sold, and injected Perry with ketamine.
And he saw Mr. Perry freeze up and his blood pressure spike. Despite that, he left additional vials of ketamine for defendant Iwamasa to administer to Mr. Perry. Of course, defendant Iwamasa had no medical training to speak of. Likewise, after Mr. Perry's death, defendant Placencia falsified medical records and notes to try to make it look like what he was doing was legitimate.
And of course, these people are predatory. Jasveena Sangh, allegedly, I mean, having an apartment in West Hollywood's expensive. As you can see from her lifestyle, she liked living it up. So there's a text message introduced in the indictment between Miss Sangh and one of the, or Miss Jasveena Sangh and one of the doctors she was getting the liquid K from. Let's see how much of a moron he is. Friends like that who needs enemies. They charged him $50,000 for vials that cost the doctor a few $100s to get. So marking something up, if it costs $200, you mark it up 5 times, it gets to $1,000. You mark it up to $50,000. It's 50 more times. You've marked it up 250 times. I mean, you're just ripping people off at that point. Perry was registered at licensed clinics, so he was getting K. Was it not working? Did he begin to use it as a recreational item? As said earlier, there's assistants and different people that are kind of predatory towards rich people and celebrities that have drug problems, but it's kind of a two-way street because Perry had his guy, his assistant, putting it in him, which is inappropriate to ask anybody, much less your personal assistant, hey, you gotta root me up as part of your job. Takes 2 to tango. I guess when you're paying the money, you want to get the service. The amounts that Perry had in him were indicative that he had just gotten hit off, and so now his assistant is in big trouble as well.
Sangh knew that the ketamine she supplied could be deadly, since in 2019 she had sold ketamine to Cody McLaury, who died at the age of 33. But despite this knowledge, she continued to sell ketamine and methamphetamine throughout Los Angeles.
So substances you may never have heard of are popular amongst the famous and wealthy, or just odd people around the country, as they have the resources and the personality to seek new limits to cross. My documentary, American Dope, Acid Dreams, documents the use of LSD by such Hollywood luminaries as Cary Grant all the way back in the early 50s as prescribed by psychiatrists, much like Kay now. All around Los Angeles right now, ayahuasca and some even ibogaine ceremonies are being held in private homes. Like the LSD parties of the 50s and 60s, ayahuasca and ibogaine are very, very strong substances. Ayahuasca, of course, comes from South America. It's a tribal medicine. I mean, there is some groups down there that ingest it almost every day in smaller amounts. Ibogaine has shown some efficacy in breaking people of addiction that comes from the motherland, aka Africa. But like 2% of the times when you take ibogaine, you die or something because it elevates your heart rate. Either Larry Page or Sergey Brin, one of them. Those are the two people that founded Google. One of them just put about 30 million into a company investigating ibogaine, trying to make it into a marketable drug. So there's a lot of energy towards not just psychedelics, but all these other strong chemicals. What's wrong with Americans that we feel so bad that we need increasingly strong substances, even those amongst us that are supposed to have made it and be successful, the beautiful people, the rich, the famous, the masters of the universe, the people that run Google. It is a little dangerous that there's this marketing vibe around this stuff as if it's inherently good and healthy and we're supposed to do it. Maybe, I don't, I've taken much, different stuff and it's cool, but mystical experiences and all that, I mean, I think that's kind of in your head and you can find what you're looking for even in a D-rug. A K has dissociative properties. I guess it would be sort of like Shermalacious or CP. They used to be popular. You disassociate from your body, which doesn't sound like it'd be enjoyable, but people like it, and oddly enough, a lot of highly educated people, professors. Charles Grobe, he wouldn't say who, but they, at the time I did this interview with him, they had to have an intervention on one of his colleagues who was using too much. The question is giving people other substances a cure for their addiction to a different substance? Maybe, but is it missing sort of the point? I mean, a lot of people do use substances recreationally. Lots of Americans are able to have on Friday 2 drinks or something and enjoy themselves. But a lot of people don't really use stuff recreationally, despite the negative consequences. I mean, in jail you would see people that had been clean 9, 10, 12 months. They certainly didn't have any physical need for anything, and they were looking good. They were eating, doing their push-ups, and they had been reading their Bible or their whatever. And as their release date approached, their personality would change, and everyone coming in, they're asking them, hey, is such and such crack house still open? Does such and such still have this and that? And you could tell they were planning on going and re-addicting themselves, which means something's missing inside. Just like it was in Matthew Perry, he was wanting, even with this same K treatment that Elon Musk said was helpful to him. Perry wanted it at home with him and his assistant to administer it. And he's, of course, lost his life last year. And now you have Miss Jasveena Sangh in the same position as the former Mimi Snowy, who's cooling her heels in federal lockup like Miss Singh probably will be too. So it's not all fun and games in the city of Los Angeles. Al Prophet, American Dope.